Welcome to the Alpha Hash Rate podcast, or Alpha as we like to call it. Um, so this is a new venture that we're starting up. It's basically mining for the everyman, and we've kicked off with a website, and it's pretty cool. So like that that image we have in the background there is it's actually a space. Is that like one of the spaces that we have, Chris?
Yeah,
Or
yeah. So we're lucky enough to sort of have a partner, a friend of mine that I've known for about 5 years, who runs an energy company in South Australia, and he does a lot of stuff on renewables. So he puts up solar farms predominantly all across regional South Australia, and so this is just one of the about 100 sites that he
so
has.
cool, so cool.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how big this is in terms of sort of kilowatt or anything like that. Just one of the photos that I pinched. But he's got sites anywhere from like 2 megawatt. I think some of the bigger sites are like 5 megawatt. Like, so they're pretty sizable. And there's obviously some smaller ones as well, like 200 and 200 kilowatts and stuff like that. But essentially, yeah, he's sitting on a gold mine, and I've been twisting his arm for a few years at a family barbecue about 4 years ago. We met, and I was basically just orange pilling him at the time, and he didn't know anything. Like, he was super green, and he was just absolutely fascinated. I remember the whole 4-5 hours that we were there at the family barbecue, he did not leave
Oh
my side
wow, I
other
didn't
to
know
go
that.
and
That's
get some
cool.
food. And yeah, like he's obviously, likes new ideas and into technology and all that sort of stuff. And so when he got talking to me, and obviously had never come across someone that could explain Bitcoin and
Yeah.
knew it to the detail. Not that I'm an expert or anything like that, but he was just
No,
so
hang on.
fascinated.
I think you can call yourself an expert at this
No, I don't.
stage.
I don't like doing that. Like, I'm learning just like everyone else. There's plenty of shit I don't know about as well. But
Yeah.
yeah, I basically just, I threw him down the rabbit hole, and he just had questions and questions and questions, and I tried my best to answer as many as I could. And so, fast forward a couple of years time, he's kind of been mining a little bit here and there, experimenting with a few little home setups. And I mean, this is how green he was. He went to buy some ASICs from Bitmain to start mining Bitcoin, and he bought some Decred ones instead, just because he didn't know
Oh no.
that. I mean, they all kind of look the same, right? Like, they're all these
Yeah.
big silver boxes, and he bought some. He's like, oh, cool, these are in stock. At the time, I think they were like all out of stock for the SHA 256 Bitcoin miners. So he's just like, oh,
Oh
they're in stock. So
man.
I'm not sure if it was him or one of his like partners that he just said, go buy some miners for me. Made that mistake, but it's like he bought, like, I don't even know how many it was, 10 or 15 miners. I can't remember, but he was mining Decred for a bunch of time. Just, I mean, that's what he got, so he may as well mine it, right? But he's since started mining Bitcoin, and he's been basically working on a couple of different projects with another friend of his who I've met as well, also living in South Australia, who is a bit more of a Bitcoiner in terms of getting into the tech and falling down the rabbit hole. And I mean, not the other guy isn't either, but yeah, so they've been working on a couple of like different projects for some other clients with specifically immersion cooled Bitcoin mining, which
So
is,
cool. So cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
something
Literally.
that, yeah, very cool. So cool. Something that I've never really seen before in person until I visited the farm a few weeks ago in Adelaide. And it was awesome to see. I mean, everyone's kind of used to seeing, big warehouses with racks full of ASICs. Just, you see videos, and it's just like you almost got to block your ears because they're so freaking loud.
Mm.
And they obviously generate a lot of heat. And so you go to an immersion mining setup with 50 ASICs or 100 ASICs, and you could fall asleep in the container with them. Like,
It's crazy.
it's
Yeah.
pretty much dead quiet. And so I saw that, and I was like, holy shit, like that's really bloody cool. I've kind of come full circle with Bitcoin mining. I remember in 2011, I went to a friend's house, and I kind of think of him as one of my big computer nerd guys.
Yeah.
So when it comes to like hardware and stuff, he's generally at the forefront. And so whilst I was experimenting with fake internet money on Tor and different marketplaces, because that's all my understanding of Bitcoin was back then. He had all these different machines with GPUs in them mining Bitcoin. And I remember I went to his house. I remember very vividly, actually. I think it was 2012. I went to his house and he had like all these towers on his computer, on his desk, I should say, with all these computing hardware. And I was like, dude, what the hell are you doing with all this stuff? Like, I know you game, but do you really need all of this to be gaming? He's like, no, I'm mining Bitcoin. And that concept to me was so foreign. I was like, what do you mean you're mining Bitcoin? What is that? Man, I remember, we were there for hours just talking about it. And I was just gobsmacked, like most people are when they're explained how it all works. And I remember leaving. There's a bunch of friends that came and hung out at that mate's house that night. And I remember leaving there saying, like, we should, like, seriously, let's like I was 18 or 19 at the time, like on an apprenticeship wage, earning $300 a week, $8.50 an hour. Jesus. I remember saying, nothing. Yeah. Thankfully, I was still living at home. I mean, I couldn't afford to live out of home. But I remember saying to all my friends, like, hey, let's all round up $1,000 together. Let's do what Andrew's doing and start mining Bitcoin. Like, this is cool. Yeah. And I remember we talked about it for a few weeks, but it kind of just fizzled to nothing because no one had the conviction. We at that point, I still didn't read the white paper. It was just this different hobby, essentially. Yeah. And nothing came of it. Like $1,000 risk back in 2011, 2012, when Bitcoin was like, I think at that point it was like $100, if that.
Nah, it would have been like $3 or something. So
on an apprenticeship wage, like $1,000 was, almost a month's worth of work for me. I couldn't afford to do that, and it was just too big of a risk. So we just basically shelved it. And so fast forward now, 2022, 10 years later, I've come full circle and I want to mine Bitcoin again. Yeah. And, it's funny because I would have had a much more profitable time had I done it 10 years ago. But I still think, hash rate's at all-time highs now. And I still think I want to throw my hat into the ring. So basically, this is how alpha hash rates come to kind of fruition is, I've got these connections through my network. I kind of got all the pieces of the puzzle laid out on the table, and I just kind of want to put it all together and make something of it and give other people the same opportunity that I guess I didn't have, or I wasn't willing to take 10 years ago.
Also, like back then, like unless you're an uber geek like me, like it was really difficult. So it literally took me so I was GPU mining back in 2012 and researching it like before then as well. And it was funny like how I came like to find BTC because I was actually researching universal basic income, ironically. Okay. Yeah, it's crazy. So I was just like thinking of like altruistic ways where, looking at the monetary system, how it works. It was like around like the Occupy movement, like, like that whole Occupy Wall Street, rah, rah, rah. It was a bit of momentum. I was like, oh, it'd be cool if we could like, develop a some sort of UBI or something based off that. That's when I first learned about that concept. And then I came across BTC. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, this is UBI. This is awesome. And I was looking at it because I got a network engineering background. I was like, oh my God, it's like authentication on every node. Oh, this is amazing. And I was thinking, because it was still sort of CPU based, I'm like, well, everyone runs that on their computer. That's a UBI. Like you don't have to do anything else. And it's the proof of work algorithm is universal basic income, or as Andreas calls it, universal access to basic finance, which is probably more accurate. But in my mind, I was like, oh, this is the answer. And like nobody listened to me. It's like, what are you talking about? You nut job. So I ended up just like mining BTC based off that just to figure it out myself so I could get other people doing the same thing. And nobody did. I was just a lone warrior sort of doing it on my own until the BTC center. But that being said, like if you had the skills, like if it was more widely accessible to people and it was like easy to sort of do, because it wasn't easy like to actually get up and running with GPUs back then. It was just crazy stuff.
Yeah. Oh, there's so much limited information out there. Like you really got to dig onto forums. Like
it was hours
like
of just
10 people on it talking about Bitcoin in some shadowy corner of the internet.
yeah. So yeah, sort of doing that. So like with alpha hash rate, like if we can make it accessible to to the everyman. So like kind of what I was trying to do, just yelling at people back then, but having an actual infrastructure to get that off the ground. I think that'd be
Well,
really
it's
cool.
kind of a similar problem, but slightly different. So back then it was more of a getting the information to understand the technicalities. Whilst that information is pretty readily available now, and obviously the software and tooling has made that a lot easier for people to configure miners and all that sort of stuff. The new problem is essentially, whilst you used to be able to do it on towers from your home PC and a couple of GPUs or a CPU,
Yeah.
that's no longer effective given how the difficulty algorithm has progressed and how the hash
Although,
rate has.
I did mean to bring this up on the last podcast as well. I don't know if you saw that guy who set up like a couple of the old ASICs, like the USB ASICs with solar, and he's just like, oh, just for shits and giggles, I'll set it up, and he won a whole block.
Oh, oh my God.
Yeah, it's like winning the lottery times 1,000. Like,
Yeah, that's
never
crazy.
gonna happen again. But a guy
Nah.
actually did it, just setting up. It really illustrates like the power of decentralization and the network, right? It's really fair. It's a fair system.
I mean, that's far few in between. Like that's,
Yes.
that
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
happen very often. If it may
It'll
not
never
happen
happen
again.
again, I don't think.
Yeah,
But
it
it's
likely will never happen again. But
yeah.
so the current problem is now, because hardware needs to be, generally most people are now mining with ASICs. These are specialized chips built from manufacturers around the world that, are designed specifically for Bitcoin mining, and they're, quite loud and quite hot in terms of generating heat from the electricity and energy consumption that it uses. Most people can't really do that at home anymore. So whilst you used to be able to do it with your laptop, and this, I guess, if you read the white paper, was kind of Satoshi's vision initially, was everyone could be mining it from their local PC. It's obviously progressed and become sort of institutionalized, so to speak. It is making it difficult for people like myself and yourself, us home miners, to be able to compete. We could buy one ASIC and plug it in, and the effectiveness of that is pretty limited. And we can obviously join a pool and get some pretty consistent payouts. But there is the kind of element of, where do you host it? How do you minimize the noise? How do you control the heat? So there are new problems. Whilst the configuration problems aren't necessarily as technically challenging as what they were when you started Bitcoin mining, there's other problems. And so I guess this is kind of where alpha hash rate comes in. And we're not necessarily doing anything revolutionary. There are other service providers out there offering similar types of services to different levels of quality. And I think that's kind of, well, mainly my template for a startup is it something that I would participate in? Like, so my first startup was CoinStock, which was a hardware wallet reseller. And basically there was nowhere in Australia to get hardware wallets to protect your Bitcoin and to put them on cold storage. And so thus a company was formed. And so this is a similar type of template. I want to mine Bitcoin. I don't have the facilities. I don't have the technical know-how, the access to cheap electricity, to clean electricity. So there's a gap in the market. And whilst there are some other service providers around the world, there is, as far as I know, pretty limited possibilities in Australia. And so this is how alpha hash rate has essentially started. There's a problem, there's a gap in the market that I want a service for myself. And so there must be others out there that also, I'm not overly smart or super unique. So there must be other people out there that want a similar type of service. And so I'm lucky enough to have some of the pieces of the puzzle. And I just want to put it together and package it up and offer a service that I would like to get for myself, whilst it isn't available out there from somebody else.
And I think it's also there's a few other issues, like with the current and even legacy mining systems that have been around. So like, I mean, I've kind of gone through every form of mining. I think, like, even the first ASICs that dropped was a company called Butterfly Labs, and it was good. Mine some Bitcoin. It was awesome, but actually getting the hardware took months. I'm talking like 6 to 8 months for it to actually come through. And it was a real problem because it seemed like, and I'm pretty sure this is what was happening at the time. Like they were basically mining until it wasn't profitable, like with my hardware, and then sending it out like to whoever was sort of buying it.
I've heard
And
those kind of rumors before.
real shysters, really. Like it was pretty gross. But um, I mean that's obviously a big problem that, and I think we can address that and fix that with alpha hash rate with this platform. Um, and the other big thing I've been doing just recently, I'm actually mining at home. So I've got a Tesla battery and some Apollo miners and stuff here. So I'm actually mining BTC from my house as well. But I'm using a company called Compass, and Compass basically do like hosting, so akin to what we're doing. But mine's over in America, so I can't see it. Don't really know where it is, and it's all very sort of cloak and dagger. And as good as it's been so far, there has been times where it sort of dropped out. Haven't really had much communication with the company to see like what's happening with my miner. Um, and I think that's another aspect that we could probably fix as well with this, and the fact it's in Australia. So I think focusing on Australia and like we've both said in the past, like onboarding Australians and getting like Australia over the hump, I suppose, is really important to me. And I think mining's kind of the way to do it. And I think it's honestly, I think it's going to be the new DCA or dollar cost averaging. It's like the concept of buying BTC from an exchange every day or every month or every week or whatever it is. Instead of that, why not mine and contribute to the hash rate, which in turn contributes to the security of those coins, and you don't have to deal with the exchange. Like it just makes so
I think
much
that's a strong
sense.
narrative. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it's going to, I mean, Troy Cross talks about this a lot as well. Securing your own coins through the equivalent amount of hash rate per the network. So say, for instance, you owned 2% of the Bitcoin supply, which would be a hell of a lot, but
Yep.
just use that random number for argument's sake, then you should mine 2% of the Bitcoin network's hash
Bingo.
rate,
Yep.
ideally through renewable energy sources to help push that kind of narrative. Whether you believe in that or not is up to your personal opinion, but that's kind of the way that we're going with all this sort of stuff. So yeah, I mean, there's a number of different things. I mean, you touched on it. Compass was definitely one of the inspirations for Alpha, and whilst I don't want to rag on them too much, they've certainly are leading the industry in terms of this
Mm-hmm.
type of hosted service. And
Yep.
I mean, you use them yourself. I certainly would use them,
Yep.
although I've heard some stories. And I mean, to be fair, the big thing that turned me away from Compass was the fact that the lead time was months. So I was going to buy a miner off them today, upfront the capital today, and not be mining Bitcoin for 2-3 months or however long it took for the hardware to be plugged into the facilities that I selected. So for me, I saw that as an opportunity to make that better, and that's essentially what has now come to fruition as alpha hash rate. And even better, we can do it in our backyard, and we can do it through clean energy sources, and we can provide a better customer support experience. And probably the big thing that we're not even touching on here is the fact that we're going to be offering immersion cooled Bitcoin mining, which is something that I could be wrong here, but I'm not entirely sure if anybody else is doing it in this type of package, where a full end-to-end solution, literally you don't have to know anything about Bitcoin mining in terms of the technicalities. All you need to do is essentially select your piece of hardware of choice and have a Bitcoin address, so you can earn the rewards and have them sent to you from the mining operations. Everything else is handled by Alpha. So we'll source the hardware, we'll get the hardware shipped to the facilities, we'll plug them in, we'll host them, we'll connect them to the energy grid, we'll configure them, we'll select your pool on your behalf. Literally, you just give us your Bitcoin address so you can receive the rewards. We'll take care of everything. And I think, that opens up the opportunity to people who maybe are sitting on the fence, or who have always thought, I'd like to get into Bitcoin mining, but I don't know where to start, or I don't have a warehouse or a bunker in my house where I can soundproof the loud noises. So, we handle all of that. And the uniqueness is that we do it with immersion cooling, which, it has its own benefits as well, not creating as much, not nearly as much, a very, very small percentage compared to air cooled in terms of noise pollution. So we can have our sites essentially next door to residential addresses. Whereas, traditional air cooled warehouses, you can't do that. Like, you'll piss your neighbors off pretty damn quickly.
Yeah.
And there'll be complaints very, very quickly that you're making too much goddamn noise. And then you got to worry about, dissipating the heat or cooling the heat through air conditioning or some sort of regulation. So there's a myriad of different benefits to immersion cooling. And this is something that is not possible, generally speaking, for a home miner to conduct, like to have a tank, to understand. I mean, generally speaking, and I was still shocked when I went and visited the farm for the first time and saw a big tank with 50 ASICs in it dipped in this liquid. I was like, are we sure this is like the right idea? Like, because usually electronics and liquid
don't mix. Yeah,
you don't want to be putting those two things together, but it bloody works, and it's really cool. And there's other great benefits where you can, less maintenance,
overclocking,
overclocking, the ability to overclock more safely, better regulation of temperature, no dust collection, so you don't have to be cleaning fans all the time because they're collecting dust. So
it's a nightmare. Yeah.
So there's a bunch of different great benefits to immersion cooling, and we're exploring this, and we want to be able to essentially offer that to the everyman, like you said. You don't have any of the expertise or any of the facilities to be able to do this yourself. You can basically hand that over to us, and we'll do all the heavy lifting, and you just earn the sats.
The other, and probably the last point I want to touch on is people mining alts. So I know like a gang of people now, mates, who are mining all different sorts of alts. So they've bought different ASICs. Ethereum is obviously still a big one. People were mining, sort of shifting over to Ethereum Classic with GPU mining and that. And the narrative that they always have is just the barrier to entry for BTC mining is just too big, and the returns aren't good enough. So, which is nonsense, right? Because it's just such low time preference. And I think the big thing is that they don't have a space to do, like, because the ASICs are quite big. They don't have like an area to put that in, and like you said, the noise and everything. So I think this is going to help all those guys across the line to migrate away from those alts into mining BTC as well. And that's another thing I'm really excited about.
Yeah, I think that's an entirely valid point. And I think the other thing that I'd add to that is what I want to focus on with Alpha is, getting people to think more about hash rate and thinking in Satoshis as opposed to fiat. And so whilst your friends and plenty of other people out there mine Ethereum Classic or Ethereum or you name shitcoin,
Doge,
whatever shitcoin the flavor of the week is, because they're getting more dollars out of that hash rate. That kind of thinking is not what I'm interested in. So for those that don't know, I have set myself a mission from January 1st, 2022, not to check the fiat price of Bitcoin. So I literally have not checked it for 129 days as of today. Now, obviously, I get sentiments through Bitcoin Twitter and all that sort of stuff, and I get an idea of which direction it's going, but I have not actively gone to, say, CoinMarketCap or gone to any type of website that displays the fiat price of Bitcoin. And that's, to your point, lowering the time preference of my savings, essentially, because what happens today, tomorrow, next week, next month, heck, even next year is inconsequential as to where I think this thing is going. And I think most Bitcoiners can probably generally agree on that. So thinking in Satoshis and not thinking in fiat is an important element to what we're trying to do here with Alpha, and try to educate people. And it's not about collecting dollars per day. It's about getting as much Bitcoin. That's the scarce commodity in this whole thing. Is there's only
but
ever
how do I
be
pay my
million.
bills?
Pay your bills with cheap debt and from fiat. Like, like it's imploding before our eyes. So you don't want to be holding that shit. So use it to obtain Satoshis.
That's right. Exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just makes so much sense. But it is hard for people. I don't understand that, and they're still sort of stuck in that mindset. But the big thing is like even just retail. Like, why at this stage would you not open like a BTC account and just advertise that on the front of like your coffee shop or whatever it is? Like, it just makes so much sense. Like to be able to accept that, no middleman, and it just works. It's just the gap for education and financial literacy is what's missing there, and that
Agreed.
definitely bleeds over into mining as well. So we've got a lot of work to do, but I'm excited. I think what we're gonna build is gonna be something pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, if nothing comes out of it other than the fact that I start mining Bitcoin, I would call it success. But
Then
if we can
win.
help
Yeah.
other people like myself
Yeah.
mine Bitcoin in a simplistic, fair, and open and honest way, then even better. Because there's the whole narrative of decentralizing hash rate and getting as many people to mine Bitcoin as possible. I mean, obviously, there's an element of some centralization to this because you're trusting Alpha to provide the facilities and the hosting sites and whatnot. But at the end of the day, you own the hardware, you own the hash rate. If you want to mine it in your own home, by all means, go and do that. But for those people who don't have that luxury, they don't have the location, the facility, the cheap energy,
solar's a big
the
one.
solar, the wind, whatever it is,
Yeah.
that's kind of where we plug that hole. We try to help people who maybe would never mine Bitcoin because they couldn't get into Bitcoin mining. I mean, I think that's a better outcome than people never mining Bitcoin and never getting orange pilled, right? And so that's kind of what we're here for, I think.
Definitely. All right, we might leave it at there because I got to jump ship to another podcast. Monday nights, it's crazy. Thanks heaps, Chris. This is great. We'll do another one next week, eh?
Sounds good. Yeah.
All right, cool. Follow along at alphahashrate.com, and we're slowly building out the website, and we'll have some more updates next week.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone.
Adios.